Have you ever noticed how people look at you with pity when you say you like being alone? As if there's something wrong with you for preferring your own company? Society as a whole seems to conspire to make you believe there's a flaw in liking silence, in choosing a weekend at home instead of going out, in not feeling that desperate need to always be surrounded by people. But what if I told you that you're right? Alan Watts, the philosopher who revolutionized our understanding of consciousness and existence, made it clear. Your life truly begins when you learn to be alone. And for those of us who already know this deep in our souls, these words aren't a challenge, they're a validation. There's a huge difference between being alone, because you're afraid of connection, and being alone, because that's genuinely where you find peace. Society doesn't make this distinction. For most people, anyone who chooses solitude is automatically labeled as lonely, sad, antisocial, or even problematic. But you know that's not it. You're not running away from people because you're afraid of them. You're choosing silence, because that's where you feel most alive. The world is obsessed with connection. Social media, events, networking, always being available, always responding, always present. There's constant pressure to be social, to prove you have friends, to show that you're doing things with other people. And if you don't fit that mold, if you'd rather spend Saturday night reading a book instead of being at a noisy party, you're seen as weird. But here's the truth that few have the courage to admit. Most social interactions are superficial and draining. Empty conversations about the weather, about TV shows, about nothing that really matters. People talking nonstop but never saying anything real. And you, who values depth, who needs meaning, feel lonelier in the middle of that crowd than when you're genuinely alone. You've learned something that most people spend their entire lives without discovering. Being alone isn't the problem. The problem is being surrounded by people and still feeling empty. The problem is forcing connections that don't nourish your soul just because society says you should. The problem is betraying yourself to fit into a world that was never made for people like you. Let's talk about this collective fear of loneliness that dominates our culture. There's almost a panic around the idea of being alone. People do anything to avoid it. They stay in relationships that don't work. They maintain friendships that drain them. They fill every second of the day with noise, distraction, anything to avoid having to face the silence. But you don't have that fear. In fact, you discover something different. When you're alone, when the noise of the world finally stops, that's when you can hear your own thoughts. That's when you can process what you truly feel. That's when your mind has space to breathe, to create, to exist, without the constant pressure of performing for an audience. What others call loneliness, you call necessity. Not in the sense of lack, but in the sense of fuel. You need these moments alone the same way you need air. It's when you recharge, when you reconnect with yourself, when you remember who you really are underneath all the masks the world forces you to wear. And there's more. You've realized something that scares most people. You like your own thoughts. While others do everything to run from their own mind, you find company in it. Your reflections, your ideas, your inner world is more interesting to you than most conversations you could have out there. And there's nothing wrong with that. Society created this narrative that we need others to complete us. Romantic movies sell the idea of soulmates. Self-help books talk about finding your other half. The entire culture is built around this lie that you're incomplete alone, that you need someone to be whole. But you already know that's nonsense. You're not half of anything. You're complete exactly as you are. The idea that you need another person to feel whole is offensive because it suggests there's something missing in you. And there isn't. You're not looking for someone to fill a void because there's no void to fill. This doesn't mean you hate people or that you never want connection. It means you don't need it to survive emotionally. It means that when you choose to be with someone, it's because you genuinely want to, not because you're afraid of being alone. And that's a huge difference. Most relationships are based on need. Two needy people getting together, each hoping the other will fill the void they feel. This creates dependency, not love. It creates attachment, not freedom. And you, who are already complete alone, don't need that kind of relationship. If you choose to be with someone, it'll be because that person adds something genuine to your life, not because you need them to feel whole. When you don't need external validation, you discover a kind of freedom that most people will never experience. You're not constantly checking if people like you. You're not changing who you are to fit in. You're not living your life based on what others will think. This freedom is scary for a lot of people, because it means you're completely responsible for yourself. There's no one to blame if things go wrong. There's no one to validate your choices. You have to trust yourself completely. And most people prefer the prison of others' approval than the responsibility of that freedom. But not you. You understand that depending on others' opinions is giving away your power. It's letting other people dictate your worth, your purpose, your peace of mind. And you refuse to do that. You validate yourself. You trust your own judgment. You know who you are, and that doesn't change based on how many likes you get or how many people approve of you. This doesn't mean you're arrogant or that you don't accept feedback. It means you have an internal compass, strong enough not to be shaken by every opinion that comes your way. You listen to others, consider what makes sense, and discard the rest. You're not looking for approval, you're looking for truth. And those are very different things. Here's something interesting. Relationships based on choice are completely different from relationships based on need. When you don't need anyone, when you're genuinely fine alone, the connections you choose to make are deeper and more real, because you're not clinging. You're not tolerating bad behavior because you're afraid of being alone. You're not pretending to be someone you're not to keep someone around. You're being completely honest, completely yourself, and letting people decide if they want to be around that or not. And if they don't, you're fine with that. This scares a lot of people because they interpret it as coldness or lack of interest. But that's not it. It's simply not having desperate attachment. It's understanding that people come and go, and that's normal. It's knowing you'll be fine regardless of who stays or leaves your life. And ironically, this attitude attracts much healthier connections. When you're not coming from a place of neediness, you attract people who aren't either. You find others who understand the value of solitude, who respect space, who don't confuse physical proximity with emotional intimacy. You build relationships based on mutual respect and genuine choice, not on fear of abandonment. You've probably already noticed that spending time alone isn't a waste of time. In fact, it's when you do your best work. Whether it's creative work, problem solving, or simply processing your experiences, you need solitude for that. Every great idea, every significant innovation, every profound insight happens in moments of quietness. Your brain needs space to make connections, to see patterns, to create something new. And it can't do that when it's constantly bombarded with external stimuli, with conversations, with demands for attention. You're not antisocial for needing time alone to think. You're reflective, you're deep. You process the world differently than most. And that requires space and silence. While others are consuming content non-stop, you're creating meaning. While others are busy with distraction, you're doing the real work of understanding yourself and the world around you. And that time alone also gives you clarity. When you're not constantly exposed to other people's opinions, emotions, and energies, you can see what's truly yours. You can distinguish between what you genuinely think and feel versus what was influenced or imposed by others. You can make decisions based on your own internal wisdom, not external noise. Let me tell you something you probably already know, but rarely hear. There's nothing wrong with you. The way you are, your preference for solitude, your need for space, your discomfort with excessive social interaction, all of that is valid. You don't need to change to fit into a world that values extroversion and constant connection. Modern culture is built for extroverts. Open offices, networking events, mandatory happy hours, expectation of immediate response to messages. All of this favors people who gain energy from social interaction. But you're not like that. You lose energy with too much interaction. You need time alone to recharge. And that's not a character flaw. For a long time, people like you were seen as problematic, too introspective, too distant, difficult to know. But the truth is, you simply operate on a different frequency. You value quality over quantity, depth over surface, silence over noise. And there's tremendous strength in that. You've developed a relationship with yourself that most people will never have. You know yourself. You know what drains you and what energizes you. You know your limits, and you're not afraid to protect them. You've built a rich inner life that doesn't depend on external sources of entertainment or validation. This isn't isolation, it's autonomy. Let's be honest about how society conditions you from a young age. You're taught that playing alone is sad, that eating alone at a restaurant is pathetic, that traveling alone is dangerous or weird, that living alone is a temporary state until you find someone. Every cultural message reinforces the idea that alone is bad and accompanied is good. But these messages are based on fear, not truth. Society fears people who are self-sufficient because self-sufficient people are harder to control, to sell to manipulate. If you don't need approval, you won't bend to social pressure. If you like being alone, you won't buy products that promise to make you more popular or attractive. And so culture creates narratives that make you feel bad for being who you are. Solitary characters in movies are always portrayed as sad or dangerous. People who like staying home are called boring. Individuals who value privacy are seen as having something to hide. All of this is propaganda designed to make you conform. But you can see through it. You can recognize these messages for what they are. Attempts to make you feel inadequate so you'll buy, conform, fit in. And when you see that clearly, you can simply choose not to participate. You can create your own narrative where solitude is strength, where being alone is a valid choice, where your way of living is as legitimate as any other. There's a specific type of person who will never understand you. They're the ones who get uncomfortable with silence, who need to fill every second with conversation, who feel personally offended when you prefer to stay home. They'll try to convince you that you're missing something. They'll invite you out repeatedly, as if your refusal was just shyness to be overcome. These people aren't bad. They simply can't comprehend a life experience so different from theirs. For them, being alone is genuinely uncomfortable, so they assume it must be the same for you. They're projecting their own fears and needs onto you, and you need to be okay with the fact that they'll never truly understand. You don't need to justify your choices to these people. You don't need to explain why you canceled plans again, why you don't want to go to that party, why you need an entire weekend alone. Your reasons are valid simply because they're your reasons, and people who truly respect you will accept that, even if they don't completely understand. What you need is to find those rare people who get it, who also value solitude, who respect boundaries without feeling rejected, who can go weeks without talking to you and pick up the conversation exactly where it left off, without drama, without resentment. These people exist, and when you find them, you discover that quality is infinitely better than quantity. There's an essential practice that you probably already do without thinking much about it. You intentionally cultivate your solitude. You create space to be alone. You protect that time as if it were sacred, because for you, it is. But it's worth being conscious about how you do this and why. Maybe you have rituals. A morning walk before the world wakes up. A cup of coffee on the porch watching the sunrise. Hours of reading in a favorite corner of the house. Time to write, to think, to simply exist without agenda or objective. These moments aren't luxury for you. They're necessity. They're when you feel most yourself. And you've learned to protect these moments. You say no to invitations that will invade this time. You turn off notifications. You create physical and temporal barriers between you and the world's demands. Because you understand that if you don't protect your time alone, no one else will do it for you. The world will suck up every minute you allow. This also means being selective about what you allow into your mental space. You don't consume content indiscriminately. You don't fill your mind with noise just because it's available. You carefully choose what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, because you know all of this shapes your inner world. And your inner world is your sanctuary. Here's something you've probably experienced. The more comfortable you become with yourself, the more intolerant you become of nonsense. Superficial conversations you used to tolerate now seem unbearable. Social dynamics you used to participate in now seem absurd. Drama you used to get involved in now seems completely unnecessary. This isn't you becoming bitter or antisocial. It's you raising your standards. It's you recognizing that your time and energy are finite and valuable. It's you choosing to spend these resources only on things that truly matter to you. And most social interactions simply don't pass that test. You no longer feel that obligation to be polite at the cost of your peace of mind. You don't fake interest in conversations that bore you. You don't participate in gossip or drama. You don't maintain relationships just because they've always been there. You've become ruthlessly honest about what serves you and what doesn't. And you don't apologize for it. This can make you seem difficult or demanding to some. But you're not being difficult, you're being clear about your boundaries. You're not being demanding, you're having standards. And anyone who has a problem with that probably isn't someone who should be in your life anyway. People who respect you will respect your boundaries, even if those boundaries are firmer than normal. There's a fear that many people carry about liking to be alone, the fear of becoming too disconnected, of losing the ability to relate to others, of completely isolating yourself from the world. But this fear is based on not understanding the difference between healthy isolation and harmful isolation. Harmful isolation comes from fear. It's when you avoid people because you're afraid of being hurt, judged, rejected. It's when you build walls so high that no one can get in, even when you really want connection. It's when your solitude transforms into a prison instead of a sanctuary. That's not what you're doing. What you're doing is conscious choice. You're alone because that's where you function best, not because you're running away. You have the ability to connect with others when you choose to do so. You simply choose to do it less frequently and on your own terms. You're not trapped in solitude. You're thriving in it. And here's the truth. You probably have more awareness about this than most. You question your choices. You examine yourself. You ask yourself if you're avoiding people for healthy or unhealthy reasons. That very awareness is a sign that you're fine. People who truly have isolation problems rarely stop to question whether what they're doing is healthy. Let me talk about something you may have noticed. You see patterns that other people don't see. You understand dynamics that go unnoticed by most. You can read situations and people with a clarity that sometimes even scares you. And you know why? Because you spend time observing instead of just participating. When you're alone, when you have space to reflect, you process what you see and experience in a deeper way. You're not just reacting, you're analyzing. You're not just living, you're understanding. This distance you maintain from situations gives you perspective that others don't have. This can make you feel alienated sometimes, because you see things that others don't see, and you can't just unsee them. You notice when people are lying to themselves. You recognize destructive patterns. You see where things are heading before they get there. And you can't participate naively in situations when you see all of this so clearly. But this vision is a gift, not a curse. Yes, it can be lonely to see the world so differently, but it also protects you. It allows you to make better choices. It helps you avoid traps that others fall into repeatedly. It gives you wisdom that comes from deep observation and reflection. And this is only possible because you have time and space to truly think. Let's talk about creativity and solitude, because they're deeply connected. Every creative person, every original thinker, every true artist needs time alone. It's not a coincidence. Creativity doesn't happen in the middle of the noise and chaos of constant social life. It happens in silence, in quietness, when your mind has space to wander and make unexpected connections. You've probably noticed that your best ideas come when you're alone. In the shower, on a walk, right before sleep, in moments where you're not trying to have ideas, just existing. That's because your brain needs a state of relaxation to access creativity. And it's impossible to completely relax when you're constantly managing social interactions. Every person you meet, every conversation you have, every social interaction requires mental energy. You're reading signals, responding appropriately, managing impressions. This uses cognitive resources that could be being used for creative thinking. That's why you feel more creative, more yourself, more capable when you're alone. Because all your mental capacity is available to you, not being divided among multiple demands. And it's not just creativity, it's clarity of thought in general. When you need to make an important decision, solve a complex problem, or understand something deep about yourself, you need solitude. You need that space where there's no one influencing, no one pressuring, no one pushing you in one direction or another. Just you and your own internal wisdom. Here's an important realization. Embracing your need for solitude is an act of self-love. It's you recognizing what you need and giving yourself permission to have it, even though the whole world tells you that you should want something else. It's you choosing your peace of mind instead of social conformity. It's you respecting your nature instead of trying to change it. For a long time, you probably tried to be different, tried to be more social, more open, more available, tried to force yourself to like things that exhaust you, tried to fit into a mold that was never made for you. And that left you exhausted, frustrated, feeling inadequate, because you were fighting against your own nature. But then something changed. Maybe gradually, maybe suddenly, you stopped fighting. You accepted that this is the way you are. You decided that it's okay to like being alone, that there's nothing to fix, that you don't need to change to be acceptable. And that acceptance was liberating. Accepting your need for solitude is spiritual maturity. It's wisdom. It's recognizing that there's no right way to be human. It's understanding that your journey is yours. And it doesn't need to look like anyone else's journey. It's having the courage to live authentically, even when that means living differently from most. And that, more than anything else, is when your life truly begins. In the end, Alan Watts's message is simple but profound. You're not waiting for your life to begin when you find the right people, when you get the perfect relationship, when you finally fit in. Your life begins now, in this moment, when you stop fighting against who you are and fully embrace your nature. When you recognize that being alone isn't something to be cured, but something to be celebrated. When you understand that the most important person you need to be okay with is yourself. If you've made it this far, if you've recognized your own journey in these words, then you're ready to go deeper. I've created an exclusive ebook called Alchemy and Archetypes, where I explore exactly this process of inner transformation through the 4 alchemical phases that take you from the darkness of self-deception to the light of wholeness. In it, you'll discover how to face the hidden aspects of yourself, reconcile your internal opposites, find your authentic purpose, and live from your truest essence. This material isn't for those seeking quick answers, it's for those willing to do the deep work of becoming whole. The link is in the first pinned comment. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel for more content on inner transformation, and I'll see you on the next journey.